Hello and welcome back to A Shot of Wildlife. This morning I'm at Hickling Broad, which is a Norfolk Wildlife Trust Reserve, and I'm with JP, Greg and Graham. Graham and Greg you've met before. JP also has a YouTube channel. They'll all be linked in the description down below. There's not really a plan. We're going to take a walk around, see what wildlife we find, probably have a few jokes on the way if they can tolerate me, and yeah, hopefully we see some stuff. It's maybe about 27 degrees, so at least I'm going to get a tan if nothing else. Let's get going. You might remember Hickling Broad from one of my previous videos. It's usually a great site for wildlife, and it didn't take long before we saw our first bit of action, a charm of goldfinches. The two birds here at the top, with their red, white and black head markings, are adults, whilst the one lower down is a more plainly coloured juvenile and would have hatched this year. The first part of our route was a wet woodland, and being quite early in the morning, a lot of the brambles and branches were speckled with dew-covered spiders' webs. A few of the spiders had already emerged, including this cross orb weaver, which you might recognise as they are commonly known as the European garden spider. We carried on down the pathway and soon came to a raised ridge with panoramic views over the reed beds and wetlands, which is where most of the reserve's residents live. There wasn't much activity here, which we didn't know at the time was going to be a bit of a theme for the day, but one animal that did make an appearance was this little egret. Watch closely as it stalks through the shallows, occasionally wagging its bright yellow feet to try to disturb any potential prey. So we're now heading to what's known as Stubbs Mill, which is probably the furthest point of the reserve we're going to go to today. It's also our best chance of seeing some harriers, I think, because it's going to be so warm. They'll move away from the places where you can see them by the time we get there, unless we go there first. So fingers crossed for some harriers, but if not, we're all going to get our steps in today anyway. Good times. Along the next track we walked down, there are occasional openings in the hedges where we could spot wildlife undetected, including this loose flock of mallards in their dull late summer plumage, and foraging in one of the nearby stubble fields was a bird that had almost caused me to fail in a recent challenge, the stock dove. The light wasn't the best to show what separates these from the similar wood pigeon, but they lack the white neck patch and are a bit smaller than their more common cousins. We had been hoping to see cranes at Hickling, and when I saw some movement within the reeds, it did cause a moment of excitement, but no, it was a grey heron. The dew had dried up from the brambles by now, and they had become peppered with the buzz of dragonflies. I believe this one is a juvenile male ruddy darter, separated from the common darter by its club-shaped lower half. We carried on along the track, and in a few minutes made it to the raised up viewing area at Stubbs Mill. In the winter, this is a brilliant place to see marsh harriers as they come into roost, but it can be quiet in the warmer months, and there wasn't much to see when we arrived. So we've made it to Stubbs Mill, and unfortunately, as feared, there are no birds here. If you're wondering why I look like Casper the Friendly Ghost, it's because I just put some sun cream on that I found in a bathroom that's been there for too long, and there was a reason. Anyway, the guys are enjoying themselves. Are you enjoying yourselves?
Yeah, fab. Yeah, lovely place.
Yeah, brilliant.
Really nice.
It's about 28 degrees and it's going to get warmer, so let's go and find some wildlife. It turns out that the sun cream had in fact completely rubbed in, and that wasn't the only thing I was wrong about. Whilst filming these cows, Graham pointed out that there were some birds in front of us, or at least flying past. These, with their elongated necks and trailing legs, are unmistakably the UK's tallest bird, and a species that I've only seen a handful of times before, common cranes. They were very far away, and I had prepared myself to be apologising for this footage of them, but I'm actually pretty happy with it. Sometimes, even amateurs like me get lucky. cranes are one of several recent conservation success stories when it comes to wetland birds in the UK, having gone extinct here in the 16th century. They first returned in September of 1979 when two birds were spotted, not just here in Norfolk, but right here at Hickling Broad. They are now found in good numbers at multiple sites around the country. It's great to think that some of these giving us a late summer flyby are probably the direct descendants of those first bold recolonisers. As we started to make our way back from Stubbs Mill, we took a moment to appreciate how many insects were visiting this small patch of ivy. The star of the show for me was this red admiral butterfly, a species that mostly migrates to the UK in the spring from mainland Europe and Africa, but can also overwinter here by hibernating. I was acting as guide for the day, so quickly took Graham and JP to have a closer look at this mill, and definitely didn't go the wrong way before we got back onto the right route and headed back towards the main area of Hickling Broad. Let's pretend I didn't have to run ahead and place this camera. Have you ever seen such a handsome bunch? As we passed the stubble fields, the stock dove had gone and was replaced by a flock of lapwings. They get their name from their slow and bounding flight and make the strangest sounding calls. I have made almost 100 fact files about different birds on this channel, but lapwings are one I have yet to cover. But don't worry, it's coming soon. The dragonflies were still in abundance along the track, including this one, which I believe is an adult female common darter. See how her body tapers towards its end and is a slightly different shape to the more club-shaped body of the ruddy darter we encountered earlier. There are several larger and more colourful dragonflies here too. I am still learning how to identify the dragonflies of the UK, but I'm fairly confident that this is a male migrant hawker. Its colours were beautiful and it wasn't alone on the branch. There was a second one a few inches above it, but I didn't manage to film them both together as I became distracted by some real life drama on top of Greg's camera. Now I have no idea what either of these insects are, but the larger one of the two was definitely having a bad day. The smaller one seemed to have pierced it with its pointed proboscis mouthpart, and I'm guessing it was attempting to suck out its insides. Amazingly, it sprung to life and managed to break free. The next part of our route had the most dragonflies that I've ever seen in one place, and my head became a landing pad. So we're walking down this lane, filming a couple of dragonflies, and you don't have to look far to find one. Hopefully it's still there, if not I'm just showing you the top of my head. No. Thankfully, Graham had caught the moment on camera before the dragonfly tried to humiliate me in front of you all. Nearby, a pair of what I believe to be common darters are up to the more serious business of making the next generation. This is known as a mating wheel, and is when the male fertilises the female's eggs prior to her laying them in or near to water. In the sky high above, a buzzard briefly soared before we carried on walking. We caught a glimpse of a kingfisher, but didn't manage to catch it on film as we passed the first wetland area we'd stopped at earlier in the day. The little egot was still there, employing a more slowly approach to hunting, and in the distance was a small flock of Canada geese. See how the bird at the back doesn't have the black and white head markings? That is a greylag goose. They are often seen together and are closely related enough that they sometimes successfully hybridise. We knew the day was forecast to be warm, but it was easily 28 degrees Celsius already, so further down the track we were happy to find the shade and potential coolness of Bittern Hide. And Bitten Hide is once again bittenless. I've never seen much from here, and unfortunately the thatch roof was only serving to keep the heat inside, so we quickly made our escape and carried on walking. Along the next part of the path, Graham, who was walking at the back of the group, very almost stood on a young adder, and although Greg and JP did manage to see it, I didn't, and none of us caught it on film. There is a raised watchtower along this part of the route, but I must have not pressed record when we popped in. We didn't see any wildlife anyway, so don't worry, you didn't miss anything. We just arrived at a little viewing platform, and as soon as we got here, loads of birds, and I'm talking thousands in the distance, all took to the air. I'm not sure how good my footage was of them, but yeah, something must have scared them. Maybe a marsh harrier, or maybe a boat was going through, I guess. It's always great to see thousands of birds taking to the air in unison. These were mostly grey-lag geese, but in a flock further in the distance were more gulls than I think I've ever seen together at one time before. Closer in, some of the local mute swans had decided they weren't sticking around either, and it was time for one of our team to leave as well. There he goes. And then there was 3. Graham had to go. He lives down south and visits Norfolk on family holidays, when he always makes an effort to come and see us if he has a few hours spare. Please consider popping over to his channel after watching this and saying hello. We stopped in the next hide, Secker Hide, but just like Bitten Hide it was too hot and there was no wildlife to be seen, so we carried on. It was just after midday at this point, and wildlife was getting a bit thin on the ground, aside from this overconfident male pheasant who pretty much escorted us to the next and final hide, Cadre Hide. We've just got into Cadre Hide, and straight away we could hear a bearded tit somewhere out amongst these dense reeds. Now hopefully it's going to show itself and we can sort of nearly finish the video on a really high note. That'd be cool. You guessed it, the reeds had fallen silent, so after watching another very brief kingfisher fly past, we carried on back towards the reserve's reception and entrance. Here, I noticed that the bin had been taped up and soon realised why. A hive of European hornets had set up home. At almost double the size of a common wasp, they can look quite intimidating, but truthfully, their stings are comparable to a honeybee, and they are not usually aggressive unless provoked. I filmed this whilst being a metre away from their nest, and they didn't react to me being there at all. And on that note, it's time for me to buzz off. If you enjoyed this video, then you'll probably also like this one here that's on the screen now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.